Hi, everyone. Welcome to Jehovah Boy. I'm your host, Doug Smith. Thanks so much for tuning in. Glad to have you aboard. We are back with another email. I will keep reading these emails as long as you keep sending them. JehovahBoyPodcast@gmail.com. Send in your stories of religious extremism. They all happen to be Jehovah's Witnesses. I guess there is a line around the block of JWs ready, willing, and able to vent their frustrations with the organization and all the turmoil and trauma it's caused. And I'm happy to hear your stories and share your stories. But again, you do not have to be Jehovah's Witness. There are so many parallels between Jehovah's Witnesses and other religious extremist groups: Hasids, Scientologists, Mormons, you name it, there's parallels. So I'd love to hear your story. It doesn't have to be your story. It could be somebody you grew up with, somebody in your family that you've had dealings with, somebody that you may not have a relationship with anymore because their religious extremism caused a rift in your relationship. But whatever the case, send me your story, JehovahBoyPodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for the support. If you're supporting the Patreon, patreon.com/JehovahBoy. Everything on there is free. If you're willing to shovel me, throw me a couple of shekels, shillings, pesos to keep me afloat, keep this production going. It would mean the world to me. But either way, I appreciate the eyes and ears and your viewership, your support. And youtube.com/@WhoDougSmith for full extended interviews of all my previous episodes, full podcast episodes, stand-up clips, sketches, all kinds of shit on the YouTube. So hop over there, subscribe, and again, thanks for the support. Without further ado, let's jump into today's email that comes from Chris, who has written, "Hey Doug, I recently was introduced to your podcast and can't get enough." Well, you got to get enough, buddy, because it's a wrap for now. It's on hiatus. But there's, what do we do, 30 episodes? So hope you're getting your fill. As an ex-JW, I thought I'd take a shot and get my email on the show. When I was born, I was actually the product of a one-night stand, and my biological mother put me up for adoption. My biological grandmother asked her cousin and husband to adopt me. They were Jehovah's Witnesses. Dun, dun, dun. Sounds like the beginning of a horror movie. As if the origin wasn't bad enough. Put up for adoption after a one-night stand. Can it get any worse? Yes, it can. Okay, so this guy gets tossed to a couple of J-dubs. Chris continues, my adoptive or adopted? Was the dad also adopted? I think he means to write adoptive. My adoptive dad was raised in the religion and was baptized at 4 years old. God damn. Baptism as a Jehovah's Witness, you make that choice your own. Most people get baptized, early teen years. Some real goody Pollyanna ass kissers get baptized when they're like 9. I got married at 16 just so my mom could see it before she croaked. And I got to tell you, I never once saw a 4-year-old get baptized. That is a next level brainwashing right there. Chris continues, the story gets a little complicated from here. It's already on its way. My dad studied with my mom's family. I'm guessing the mom that put him up for adoption. Between the two, there was a 9-year difference. At the time, my dad was married. Okay, yes. At the time, my dad was married and got divorced. Not really sure of the backstory on that. And married my mom once it was legal. So this guy was adopted by this one guy who was married to some lady. They got divorced. That lady's out of the picture. Then he gets remarried to the mom that puts him up for adoption. So now he's being raised by his biological mom, adoptive father. That's what it sounds like. By all accounts, they were happy and normal until my mom had my older sister. This is hurting my brain. How did the mom have an older sister? How is this guy aware of his mom having an older sister? There's a crack in the space-time continuum here, and I'm not sure I can wrap my brain around this. Anyway, let's not get hung up on details. Then she started attending meetings less, drinking heavily, and coming up with wild conspiracy theories about the brothers and sisters. We wouldn't find, after she was diagnosed with dementia, that she suffered from bipolar disorder and was a manic depressive. By the time I came along, she was full-blown crazy and hadn't worked a regular job in close to 30 years. Okay, so by the time I came along, sounds like she was already a real shit show by the time you came along. All right, I guess that makes sense. So he legitimately does have an older sister. She was, by her own choice, bedridden and spent most of her time taking pills and sleeping. Yeah, I mean, if I had my choice as a J-dub, I would be doing the same thing. As far back as I can remember, I never enjoyed going to meetings, studying, or going out in service. In the back of my mind, I did think there was a possibility I was on the wrong side and would be struck down. My dad was the main parent who made me attend meetings. My mom would quickly slip into her cycle of thinking the entire congregation hated her wherever they lived. I know the basics and a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff when it comes to witnesses, but I can happily say I never voluntarily read the Bible or studied any of the publications. Good for you. Stick it to the man. My dad always made sure to force me to study for Tuesday night meeting and the Watchtower study. Damn, we got another one here where it's the dad. For the last year, I've been just ragging on the moms for dragging their families through the muck, and these poor husbands that just begrudgingly go along with things and let their kids be raised in cults. Now we got back-to-back episodes here of dads that are the ones pulling the trigger on this whole thing and forcing the kids into it while the mom is on the sidelines. Damn, look at this. Exception to every rule. Okay, so dad always forced me to study for Tuesday night meetings and Watchtower study. On odd occasions, when he was bored, he just decided to interrupt whatever I was doing to read a random article in the Awake magazine. I was lucky enough to go to public school, mostly because my parents' main focus was my mom while I was growing up. My dad did the usual thing of informing teachers I was a witness, but I did everything I could to fit in with kids. My home life, even from a young age, was a mix of single-child isolation and being put in the middle of my mom's spells, as my dad would call them. In reality, it was a mixture of mental illness, painkillers, and alcohol mixed. She would scream at my dad for hours over any little thing you could think of. I can remember my dad would leave home and sleep in his car, where elders would take him in and encourage him to eventually go back. And I'm sure they were of no help to him in this situation either. Anytime there's an actual problem with severe mental illness, it's never encouraged to seek out medical intervention or psychiatric treatment or medication. It's always Jehovah will take care of it. Leave it in God's hands. Which, there's something to be said for trusting in God and staying in God's path and surrendering to God's will. I mean, I'm currently trying to do that in an entirely different program, but there's times where you got to call in for reinforcements. So I'm sure the elders were of absolutely no help whatsoever. They probably just told the dad to read her a scripture. Bring her to a meeting. That'll turn things around. Okay, so at one point I couldn't stand being left behind and made him promise to take me the next time. That was a big mistake. I eventually ended up living in a rundown motel with my dad for nearly 3 months while I was in high school. All through middle school and high school, I was allowed to associate with worldly kids. All right, this guy's winning the Cool Dad Award after all. I had them over when it was safe, and I was allowed to sleep over at their houses. I mean, I guess this dad obviously realized he couldn't possibly say that bad associations spoil useful habits, because the mom, I mean, what's worse association than this mother? She's a pill-popping, drunkard, screaming lunatic who's forcing these people to live in a motel, so anything's going to be better than that. Even worldly people. My dad always seemed to go in waves of strictness with me. I now feel he gave me some freedoms because of my home life, and I will always be thankful for that. I never pioneered, read at meetings, or took a firm lead in service. My dad would tell me once in a while that he would be talked to by elders about this, but he never made me get more involved past the bare minimum, despite being fanatically faithful. When I was in 8th grade, my mom made a supposed suicide attempt during a spell. My dad called her bluff and had her taken to the hospital. After having her stomach pumped, they found nothing. Okay, so I guess her bluff was that she downed a bottle of pills, rushed to the hospital, found nothing. She and my dad signed an agreement that she would be committed if she drank again after that. It lasted about a year, and then things went back to the way they were. I went all through school in this cycle, all while my older siblings and non-believing family knew this was going on. My one escape was that every summer I would stay with my older siblings, and it really was the only part of the year I'd be happy. If I was being teased about being a JW, I'd be teased for having parents old enough to be my grandparents. Jesus, that's an added component I didn't know about. A little salt in the wound. As if things weren't hard enough for this kid. Here's yet another thing I can relate to, though. My parents, everybody thought they were my grandparents my whole childhood. Mom was 47 when I was born. Dad was 52. So that's why my dad, who's 92 now, I sometimes relate more to people that are in their 60s, pushing 70 than I do to people my own age, because we were raised by the same generation of parents. So having older parents, that's a whole different ballgame. That is not fun to have people confuse your parents for your grandparents. It's humiliating. I can't even explain why it's humiliating, but it is. You just feel like your parents are like these weak, feeble people that did you some sort of disservice by having you that late in life, and you feel judged and ashamed. Chris continues, I oftentimes wouldn't correct kids when they asked if they were my grandparents. Yeah. That's actually pretty good thinking. Just roll with it. At 19, I moved out and tried to be as inactive as I could be. At 21, I moved back home and luckily was no longer forced to attend meetings or assemblies anymore. I've now been out for 14 years and have been loving every second of it. I know it's a long email, but hopefully I can hear it read on the show one day. Keep fighting the good fight, Chris. Well, I think it goes without saying, after reading numerous emails from people raised Jehovah's Witnesses, these are some wild, fucked up families. You're taught through and through that it saves. Jesus saves, Jehovah saves, creates harmony, love, this common bond of seeking the truth and working to serve God and fulfill His will for mankind while on this earth, and fighting the good fight and leading with godly devotion. And there's all this bullshit that you're fed that it's going to lead to family unity and closeness and love and acceptance. And instead, it just creates absolute chaos and pandemonium and drives wedges between people and causes rifts and separates kids from parents, parents from extended family. It creates. I mean, you see for yourself. This is not the first time that I've read an email like this, where families are just imploding from the inside out due to often one person's allegiance to this organization. There's a trickle down effect where everything and everyone else suffers in the wake. So, damn, this is quite a tale, Chris. I'm glad that you were loving every second of being out. Sounds like you got a lot to unpack here. I'm sure it's not all sunshine and rainbows, but it sounds like you're making the most of it, and I appreciate you sending this in. I'm glad I was able to read it. Hopefully I made sense of this family situation accurately, because this was a little bit convoluted, but I think I got the picture. But Anyway, there you go, folks. You think you can top this? This was a wild mind fuck of a family story. If you think you can top it, do your best. I dare you. Jehovah Boy Podcast at gmail.com. Send in your stories. This certainly makes me feel better about my own situation. I'll tell you that much. I thought I had it rough. I thought I had a pretty wacky family history, and I do. But you guys are one after another. You guys are knocking it out of the park, and I'm feeling like I live with the fucking Cleavers by comparison. So thank you for making me feel better about my own situation. Keep those emails coming. Thank you for the support. I'll see you next time around. Goodbye.